Hello again and welcome to another episode of Thirdstone. Tonight we're going to be building the Metcalfe Hotel Wednesday low relief Tudor hotel. I think it's Tudor. So without further ado, let's jump to part one, where all the parts for part one have been cut out. So we've got the windows which need to go in the backs of those. Apparently you have to pay special attention to the notches, and those windows go into the backs of those lower windows there, and then that all gets wrapped around that base. So let's get cracking. So with the first part assembled, we now have to add these stiffening braces to each side. So let's get that done. And then this next part, we need to add the floor stiffeners. I really like the way that these work. So you have these like little slots which they tab into. So the first one can be put in, and then we need to add the M2 windows. So we're going to have to glaze those and get those put in and glue the floors down. Now at this point I'm going to be adding some LED lights to these windows. Not quite sure how many lights this building's going to have, but I suspect that we'll add an LED light on each floor by each window. So probably do that in the very next step. Anyway, let's crack on. So the LEDs I'm using are these really tiny, oh god, out of focus, really tiny LEDs. So they will need an individual resistor of 1k ohms to be wired in. So when we get to the actual wiring in a circuit board that will support all of this, we'll go into that, and I'll show you how I attach them to the model. As you can see, these have been attached with a tiny little blob of super glue, and it's important to test them after you've super glued them, because sometimes the super glue actually destroys the LED. I've also made sure that I've twisted the wires together so they're a bit easier to handle, and then we test the LED just by connecting a coin cell battery. This is a CR 2323, I think it is, but it's a 3-volt nominal. And these lights work on 3 volts. Anything more than that, honestly, they will just burn out really quickly. So as you can see, the LEDs work. That should shine enough light down into the building to be... These ones are a bit bright. They are bright white, but I didn't have any warm white LEDs. And so on to building A. So we've got glazing panels, the black wooden frames, and then the actual walls that they have to insert in. So we've got to glaze those black pieces and then get those black pieces into that wall. Getting those windows in straight is trickier than you might think, but this is where the section goes. So I've just got this dry fitting at the moment. Just contemplating whether or not I need to add some more LEDs. Whilst we're contemplating LEDs, we might as well put the B building front together. So again, just like in building A, it's a case of mounting window glass into these black frames and then inserting that into the wall. So let's get that done. So there's building A and building B dry fitted. Building B, as you can see, overhangs the doorway, so a bit of a weird construction. But let's get that glued in and we'll worry about LEDs later. And we're almost finished with this building, so we've just got to add the glazing to the doors and stack the two entrance stone sections together. Weirdly, Metcalfe have opted for or given you the option of an opening door, but given that this is a low profile building, I'm not sure what you'd see on the inside of that, but I guess it's deep enough that you could actually just put like a faux interior, but this door actually glues in that recess, so I don't know, it's possible, I guess. Anyway, let's get this done. So that's the front of this building built, and the next stage is to close in by fitting the back, but as I haven't decided whether or not I should have some more LEDs, and I think I'm probably going to, I'm gonna leave that until I've built up the circuit board so that I can test whether or not it's too much light or not enough light, and then whether or not I need to add some interior room sections, because it does look really sort of quite hollow. So yeah, I'm in an iron about that. I mean, the other Metcalfe kit that I built seemed okay, but I'm not so sure about this one. And now we get to building C. So this is the stone tower that sits to the right hand side of the building. So again, we've got windows which need to be glazed. Those windows need to go into there. That needs to be wrapped between these stiffeners, and then the crenellations need to go on the top. So the exact order of this is detailed in the instruction manual, but I think I'm actually going to put those crenellations on there first, and then mount the windows, and then mount those into there before then wrapping, because if I need to trim any of these stone inserts, then the best time to do it is when I've added it to there. Anyway, let's crack on. And finally, we're on to building D, which is the last building in the set. So here are all the parts. Now, one thing to note is that the door is actually has like the cut marks on it, yet you're actually not supposed to cut out that door. So what I've done is I've cut out another piece of the black card, which you can see there's ample extra card. So I'm going to glue that in behind to simulate a door, and then add the glazing. Shouldn't be a problem. And then just to note, there are these really odd folds which are going to help you to space the building D vertically at the top of the tower, and I'll show you that in the next section. So let's get this all put together. Well, we have the building C, sorry, building C and building D dry fit together. We've got to add on the chimney, which is just these three blocks there stacked together and then covered with the brick texture. But what I want to note is that the cardboard engineering here is really quite clever, but there are some issues. So my building doesn't quite fit into the section, and I think that's just the thickness of the card when it's folded, stacked up. Maybe the joins have expanded, but I'm going to have to fettle that together so that the back lines up. It's a bit skew-if. It does actually. It does actually sit flush. It's just the card in this corner just seems to be a little bit too thick. So we'll play around with that, get that glued in, and then we'll put the chimney on. As you can see, a little bit of fettling, and the gap was closed up, so now the back of that wall actually lines up with the back of the main wall. And you can see I've added the chimney. Now this is the 4th Metcalfe chimney I've put together, and by far the best one so far. And I think this is because it was a separate piece, so it was easier to get the brick texture to wrap round correctly. But yeah, onwards and upwards. So here we have the building, the main sections of the building put together, and it's at this point that you get to the final page in the instructions, which includes curtains. And it would have been really handy to know that there were curtains. I suppose that's stupid user error. I should have read on and read the instructions completely, because the right time to add those curtains is when you're assembling the windows. So now I've got to fiddle and fish those curtains into all of the backs of all of those windows. Now some are going to be easy to do, others going to be quite problematic. So I'm really glad that I didn't close off the back of the building, because I've still got quite a lot of curtain work to do. Whilst I wait for some resistors to arrive from eBay, I just thought it'd be a good opportunity to start colouring in the edges. So as you can see here, I've started. I'm just using cheap Crawford watercolour pencils that I got from the Works. So I think these cost about £6 for a full set. Did you see that? You're not going to get much use out of the really hot pink and very coloured range, but the bottom end range with the greens, the dark browns, the blacks, those are quite useful. So as you can see, I've just started colouring in the edging, and it hides it pretty well. So I'll continue with that and get the whole thing edged. As you can see, it's much improved. The edges are almost invisible. Yeah, had to get a bit creative on the brickwork down there, but we can always cover that up with some foliage. So pretty pleased. Given that we've got windows which are lit, I just thought I'd create some interior backdrops which we'll glue to the back of the building. We're also going to take the opportunity to chase these wires into the stone tower area, just to neaten them up and to avoid any wires dangling down between the windows and the backdrop. So with the backdrop in place and the lights on, you can kind of see into the building. I'm not sure it's a particularly effective effect. So when it comes to wiring up these LEDs, you need to use a 1 kilo ohm resistor, otherwise these LED lights will burn out we're going to be powering this with a 5-volt supply, so that's why the 1k resistor is required. It just knocks the voltage down from 5 volts to 3 volts and stops the LEDs from burning out. I usually add a common rail as well for 5 volts because there are other types of LEDs which take 5 volts. And of course you can power this from your main bus supply using a step-down converter, which you can get on Aliexpress for very, very cheap. So what we're going to do is going to add all of these 1k resistors to this board. The lights have, the building has 8 lights, so we need 8 resistors. So here are all the resistors put in. Now, the technique that I use is to form the common rail at the top. So we're going to have the positive terminal connected to here, and as you can see, what I've actually done is I've fished this end of this resistor down and out, because there are no connections between these pads. So it's not like a prototyping board where there are connections going up and down through the board. These are all isolated, so you've got to put connections between them. So I take this leg of the resistor, feed it down, back out, and that can become connected to the pad that I'm going to solder my positive wire into. And then if I flip it over, you can see down here what I've actually done is I've sort of woven the legs of those resistors to sort of capture that wire. It doesn't have to be particularly neat, but obviously we're going to solder this, so we need a good electrical connection. So let's get to soldering. So you don't have to go too overboard with the soldering setup. I've just got a cheap Chinese soldering iron with a digital display, so I can check the temperature. So when we're soldering components onto these perf boards like resistors, or if we're soldering 2 wires together, 350 degrees is absolutely spot on for this sort of stuff. The important thing in all of this setup, and it took me actually ages to learn how to solder, is it's all about the cleanliness of the tip. Okay, so getting one of these wires, copper wire scrubbing balls, is super important. So the important part of soldering is to make sure that you've got a clean tip. Okay, so I've got the soldering iron heated up to 350 degrees, which is absolutely spot on for this type of work. So we're going to really sort of stab that tip in there, and then we're going to get our solder wire, and we're just going to touch it to the tip there, get a reasonable amount on the tip, and if we stab it in there, it comes out. You might have to do this a few times. What we're looking for is a nice silvery tip. I mean, the solder is taking really well on that tip anyway. You can see the blob of solder on the end of, you can see the blob of solder on the end of the tip, the shiny bit, and that's really what we want for soldering. So what we're going to do is we're just going to solder the, I'll turn this around. So we're just going to solder these incoming pins. Okay. This is going to sort of fix our resistors in place, and then the LEDs will get connected lower down, but we need to leave the holes open so we can fish in our LED wires. So let's get this top row of resistors all soldered in. So we're just going to turn it over and then tin up our iron, and then we're going to come in here and just drop a blob of solder on there, and then come in and flood each pin with solder. I'll do this off camera because it's really tricky. So after soldering off camera, you can see I've got the first leg attached to the pad, and then if I flip it over, all of these legs are now connected together. So we can snip these off using our little wire cutters. Okay. So at this point, we're going to need to make sure that all of our red and black wires from each of the lights are paired. So I have gone through, tested each pair, and I've just attached a little blob of super glue at the end so that I can twist. I don't know if you can see that, a little bit of super glue at the end there, so I can then twist these wires together. This way we make sure that we're wiring these lights in with the correct wires paired together. Okay, so now I'm going to actually twist all of these wires together to form one wiring loom for the bottom row of lights. So I spent a bit of time grouping the upper and lower floors together, a little bit of heat shrink to keep those wires grouped together, and now we're just going to solder these onto the perf board. So as you can see, we've got the red wire poked through the unsoldered end of a resistor, and we're just going to solder that together. We're then going to take the black end of the wire, and we're actually going to move over one space or one hole, and we're going to solder it into the next hole up. So we now just have to rinse and repeat along every pair of wires and every resistor. Now we have all of the wires soldered in. I'm going to make a common negative rail, just using some of the clipped off leads from the resistors. Now we just have to solder some wires feeding the power into our circuit board. With our circuit board powered up from our USB power hub, we have all the lights on in the building, and we can now close it up properly by adding on the roof. So that's the main roof attached. Got to be super careful here because those two sort of dormer roof sections are different sizes, so don't do what I did and get them mixed up, because you'll only have to take them off again. So now the only bit to do is to close up the tower. So there we have the barge boards fitted. These are incredibly fiddly, and yeah, much patience required for adding those, but it does really close off those roof sections really nicely. So it's just chimneys and roof caps to add next. So here is the finished Hotel Wednesday, or in this case it will be the old hall. Quite a fun kit to put together, looks really good, so quite pleased with how it's turned out, and looks good with the lighting, although it would look better if there was if I'd used warm white LEDs instead of these cold white ones, but needs must when you've only got cold white LEDs in stock. But anyway, thanks for watching, and give the video a like, thumbs up, a comment, share it with anybody you think might be interested, and of course come join us next time on the next episode. So bye for now.